I have an issue in that normally the sun doesn't shine very much here. And today, of course, it's decided to shine, and it's sort of shining right in my face. So I've got the blind down, but then it goes behind a cloud, and then it's going really dark. So it's a little bit annoying.
We'll make it work. We'll make it work.
It's typical.
Where are you calling from?
Well, I'm in the UK, about an hour west of London.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's really cloudy there a lot?
I mean...
In London?
We've just had sort of 5 months of winter, so yes, it's not been fun.
So I'm in SoCal right now. So yesterday, I believe it was like 91 degrees.
So you don't get much cloud at all there, do you?
We do, but it's like a couple weeks out of the year.
Yeah, you can live with that.
And then we get a few sprinkles here and there, throughout. But man, it sucks though, because you go months without any kind of precipitation, and it's so hot and so dry.
You've got the opposite problem to us.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, we'll send you some of our rain if you could send us some of your sunshine.
Yeah, I'm gonna call you in April. I'm gonna call you in July. And so you can give us some of that rain in the middle of the summertime.
Yeah. I love it. How did you end up doing this podcast?
Oh, okay. I like telling the story. I was in the military for 26 years, and when I got out, it was a little mentally draining.
Yeah.
Right? It was stressful, just the fear of the unknown. And so a friend of mine who was also transitioning at the time, we were able to talk to other servicemen and women who were doing the same thing, who were getting out and a little anxious, but it wasn't enough. Like, I didn't get to do it enough. And so I said, well, I can control a podcast and do it in my own time, my own space, as much as I want to, as little as I want to, right?
Yeah.
So we did Hindsight the Podcast for that. And initially we were getting just veterans who had transitioned out. So you may have someone who was an infantry person who now is a comedian.
Yeah.
Or someone who was in operations who now is in Hollywood, stuff like that. So you can see, one, it's not going to be as unless you have some issues, right? And I get that, but it's not going to be as scary, or we try to make it not as scary as you believe it's going to be when you transition out, right? So that was the whole premise of it before. Now it's hindsight, right? So it's looking back, it's looking at pivotal decisions and trajectories of your career or your life, and how those decisions, how those experiences that you've gone through, coupled with your expertise in what it is that you're doing now, how those things could benefit the listeners. So that's where Hindsight is at now. Yeah.
Nice. I like it. And what are you doing on, is it a full-time gig, or are you doing other stuff as well?
No, I'm in supply chain. So me and the other guy that I was telling you about, Eric Gonzalez, we're both in the supply chain field right now. So, COVID was a hard time. So we actually stopped doing the podcast at that point. Right now, it's with these tariffs and stuff. You see the news.
It's crazy.
So it's
crazy time.
It's getting crazy again.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So this
is sort of a hobby business, or just hobby?
I would call it, I'd probably have to say hobby, because I'm not making money off of it right now. It's really is an inspirational type of platform.
Yeah.
Right. And then it also, like I said, leverages the things that you've spent your time learning how to do and giving back to the individuals who are listening, so that they can use some of those skills.
Awesome.
All right. So let's go ahead and get started. I love it.
When you look back in hindsight, everything is 20/20. In hindsight, we make mistakes, we're learning from it. In hindsight, yesterday and your tomorrow. In hindsight, is so much clearer now.
Have you ever felt stuck in your career but weren't sure how to take the leap into something new? Making a career change can be daunting, but the right strategies can make all the difference. Today, I'm joined with Yesim Nicholson, a career coach with over 20 years of experience and author of Ready to Quit Your Job. I'm not. We're here to share actionable insights on navigating career transitions with confidence. If you've been thinking about making a change but don't know where to start, guess what? this episode's for you. So how you doing, Yasmin? Did I say that right?
It's actually pronounced Yesim, but
Yesim.
yes, but I'd be very, very rich indeed if I had a penny for every time somebody called me Yasmin. It's interesting.
Well, you know, here in the States, we are taught to spell it out. I mean, sound it out, right?
Yeah.
So we see basic letters and we don't incorporate other, nationalities and different countries, right? I just see Y-E. So, So,
Yesim.
say it one more time.
Yesim.
Yesim.
Yeah.
Got you.
Perfectly pronounced.
Thank you so much. So, could you tell us just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. I'll do you the nutshell because otherwise we'll be here for days, I guess, if I tell you the full story. But I was born to a Turkish dad and an English mum who met in Germany. And my dad was a hotel manager, so we moved around a lot when I was younger. And then the reason I'm telling you about my early days is because it's very much shaped what I'm doing now, because change sort of became part of my DNA because we used to move around all the time. And so I really quite like change. And actually, if I don't have enough change, I get a little bit antsy and I have to create change. And it was really getting to midlife when I started to have conversations with peers and friends who'd been in the same career or job for, 10, 20 years and were just really, really miserable doing what they were doing. And I was a bit like, well, if you're not enjoying it, then why don't you just do something different? And it was then that I realized that actually a lot of people really struggle with change, at least, big change like that. And obviously a career change is huge. And so I thought, well, this might be something that I can help with. So I developed a group coaching program, tested it out with a few people, and it worked. So I was like, okay, there's something in this. So I did more group coaching and then started doing one-to-one coaching as well. And then wrote my book, which was published last year. And I obviously have, well, not obviously, but I have a podcast as well, which is called Your Big Career Move, where I interview people who've made big career changes, sometimes smaller career changes, but the whole idea is that hopefully it'll inspire other people who are feeling a little bit miserable in their job to do something about it.
That's what's wild. I mean, we talked a little bit before, and I may, if you allow me to, I may air some of the pre-podcast dialogue with your permission.
Yeah.
But we kind of have similar interests, right? The podcast kind of align with the same message, really to inspire you, to give you a sense of ease.
Yeah.
Right. Because I think, and in my, when I told you about leaving the military, like it's an unknown, you're safe, you're comfortable, well, you feel perceived safe, right? But you're comfortable in the area and the skills that you have in where you're at. And leaving that for something else can be, I use the word daunting, right? It can be scary.
Yeah.
It can be really scary. So tell me real quick before we go on, just tell me a little bit more about your podcast. How does it work? I like that.
So initially it just started because I was having conversations offline with people who had these amazing career change stories to tell. And as I was having these conversations, I was like, wow, these are really inspiring, cool stories. And it's a shame that they're not being shared more widely. And that's really how I thought, actually, this could lend itself to a podcast, just stories of ordinary people with extraordinary career stories to tell. So that's how it was born. And it really just started as a bit of a hobby. But it's grown and grown, and people seem to be enjoying it. And it formed, actually, a lot of the conversations that I had with people then formed part of my book. Because, I didn't want it to be just a very theoretical book. I wanted to make it as real as possible. So I included a lot of the stories from the podcast in the book, which hopefully people find interesting. Did you get around to reading it?
I hope you didn't bring that up. No, I didn't. I didn't
We'll
get it.
cut that.
I was. No, we'll leave it in here. But it's just this is me, right? So it's hindsight, and you see the little grays here. Like there's a lot of technologies, and I think I was having a technology issue, a technical issue with trying to get the code, and because I love audiobooks,
Oh, do you know,
right?
we'll try
And
again. I'll,
we're gonna try. We're gonna keep trying. I told you I was gonna get my son to help me out,
yeah,
but I haven't seen him in the last couple of days, so I need to get with him and we'll work through it. But I'm looking forward. I'm really looking forward, especially when I know that what we do it really aligns
yeah,
up, right?
yeah,
So I'm interested in seeing what strategies that you have out there, and maybe what I can learn.
yeah.
So that's
Well,
the point,
you
right?
never know. You never know. Hopefully, you'll be entertained at the very least.
Oh yeah, no, I learn a lot. I know I will learn something every time. That's my goal, to learn at least one thing every day,
Yeah,
and
that's a good goal.
that's an easy goal.
Yeah, I
There's so
like
many
that.
things out there to learn. Yeah.
That's really fun.
So, all right. So now I want to look. So we're looking at people who want to make the leap. They want to jump into a new career. So I'm gonna get into some functional questions. You can give some strategic, I don't know, some strategies, some goals, or whatever. But here's a direct question. What's the most effective way for someone to assess their strengths, values, and interests before making a career move?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's something that people really struggle with because I think it's hard to see the wood for the trees. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
when you're in a career, and especially if you've been doing it for a long time, you're used to the workplace you're in is familiar, the people you're working with are familiar, the type of work that you're doing is very familiar, and it's very easy to stay in something that feels really comfortable but
Mm-hmm.
not fun and not aligned with what what's important to you anymore. So that is the first thing, is actually being able to extract yourself from that comfort zone for a start. So, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
when I do my group coaching, we do loads of it's over a few weeks' time, and we do loads of exercises. Not just in the session, but in
Yeah.
between sessions, there's always homework. So I'm a bit mean. I set people homework. And one of the things that I get people to do is step outside of their comfort zone. And sometimes it can be something really big, doing a talk in
Mm-hmm.
front of loads of people if they're not used to doing that sort of thing. Or it can be just little things like turning around and talking to somebody in the post office queue, if that doesn't feel like a natural thing for you to do. It sounds really trite, but just starting to do things slightly differently. So, even just driving to work a different route, just to spark something different, and try to meet different people and listen to maybe podcasts that you wouldn't normally listen to. But it's just getting out of we're very easily caught up in the day to day of repeating the same day, the whole Groundhog Day thing. And it's very hard to think about anything different when you are caught up in this Groundhog Day situation where you're always having similar conversations with similar people. So I really,
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the things that I get people to do, is really stretch those boundaries and start thinking slightly differently about themselves and life. But then there's loads of things you can do to start to, like, another exercise that I do. I mean, I'm not going to bore you. I'm not going to go through every exercise that I ever do with my clients,
I
but
tell you, I like to learn one new thing a day. This is just going to get my day started off right.
I mean, we could be here for a few hours. If you've got time, let's go for it. But one of the other things that I get people to do is to start keeping a diary. So every day, at the end of each day, I love a notepad and paper. No,
Mm-hmm.
notepad and pen, even. Like, I've got 100 of them, sitting next to me at the moment. But I really encourage people to, at the end of each day, just take a couple of minutes and really think about, okay, today, what are the activities that I did that really brought me joy, that made me feel alive, that made me feel in the flow, where I felt like I was really doing something useful,
Mm-hmm.
and start creating a bit of a log of all those things that make us feel alive. And then also perhaps take a note of the things that felt really draining, like was it that Excel spreadsheet you had to spend 3 hours on, or was it going to meeting after meeting, did that just drain you of energy? And really just try to keep tabs of what are the things that fill you with energy and what are the activities that drain you of energy. And then over time, I talk about the tweaker in my book. So sometimes you feel like you need to make a massive leap and change career and do something drastic. But sometimes it's just about making small tweaks in your existing role. So I get people to just become like super hyper aware of the things that they can change in their current roles. So one of the ladies that I talk about in my book, for example, she works for a big consultancy firm. It's a good job. She enjoys it. She's really good at it. She gets paid well, etc. But over time, she was getting a little bit probably bored. Not bored because nothing to do, but bored of, just the same things and maybe not using all her skills. And her company then announced that they wanted to start a podcast, which is something that's obviously dear to us. And they were looking for somebody within the organization to host it. And she'd always loved drama and she likes being on stage and she's good at it. And she put herself forward for it and got picked. And she's now the host of this really cool podcast. I mean, they interview some amazing guests. And so she's still doing her current role, but she's added a new dimension to her existing role, which is, would never have been part of her original job description. But it's brilliant because the company now have somebody who really loves her job, and she's loving her job because it's multifaceted and she's getting to use all these skills that were sitting dormant previously. So I always encourage people, the first thing to do is there a way to tweak your existing role to just make it more fun and more fulfilling for you?
Wow. All right. So unpackage. So I always hear people say, write a journal, do a diary. I start writing. I do day 1. I'm fired up. Day 2, still got a little burn. Day 3, simmering out. Day 4, no more writing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have, and this is for me personally, if anybody else is listening and they can get some kind of spark or something that can keep me invested in journaling. Like, okay, so here's my question. So you see my dilemma. Here's my question. What can I look forward to getting out of journaling, and how long do I have to do it to be able to reap the benefits of what it is that I'm doing? And that's a hard question because a lot of people use journaling for a lot of different things.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
But for me, just I'm looking at thinking about career change or whatever. I'm starting a journal. Like, how can I stay motivated and invested in journaling?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's obviously exactly like you just said, people use journaling for different reasons and they use it in different ways. Like some people will have a set of questions that they answer every day. So, what am I grateful for today? What went really well today? What did I learn today? Which might be relevant to you. And they stick to the same questions every day. Other people just prefer to just write, don't think about it, just freestyle. And then, so it depends on what you're trying to achieve. And I guess with mine, I don't even call it journaling. I just call it just taking a few notes because it is literally, you just need to write. It doesn't matter. You can write 1 sentence or you can write 15. It doesn't really matter. All I'm getting people to do is just become hyper aware of the things that are lighting them up and trying to then use them more in their career. So I'm not, there are definitely benefits to journaling. But in the specific example that I'm giving, it's like, well, just write a few notes. You don't even have to call it journaling, because I think some people perhaps this is the case for you, have a block around it, that a journal has to be every day and it has to be like this. And I think having that sort of strictness around it, let's say, maybe is why there's less incentive for you to do it, after a certain amount of time. Yeah. It should be something that's fun, and it should be you should look forward to doing it. And I think
You know how some
if you're
go
not
ahead.
enjoying it after 3 days,
Uh-huh.
don't do it.
You know how some things are so obvious and they're like right in your face? And that's why you ask, because you're so focused on different things that you don't even see what's right in front of you. When you said some people have certain questions, maybe you can write down what you learned today. I was like, well, goddamn. That's exactly what what I could be writing about, right? And I'll tell you another thing really quick, and not to lengthen this conversation, but another thing is just looking at your writing over time. I dabble in writing, write short stories. I remember writing a short story years ago, and then even years later, I went back and I read it, and I was like, "Oh my god, I write that good? I wrote that? I don't even remember right." You know what I'm saying? So you look at things, and when you're in different space, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the shoulder.
But you
It just
can.
was I couldn't believe that I wrote it. It didn't seem like what I had written.
Yeah.
But you're in different spaces in different parts of your life, right?
Yeah.
And these inspirations come through. And in order to see it, hindsight the podcast, right? In hindsight, you look back, you go back and you look at things that you've experienced in the past. So anyway, I'm just trying to motivate myself. This is all personal and selfish
It
on
depends.
getting me
What
to
are you
write
trying
more.
to why do you feel like you need to write a journal?
For me, I think, why do I feel like writing a journal? I want to always show or see some kind of progression. And when I'm not, it's like anything else. Like you can sit there and you can gain weight or you can lose weight, right? And if you're looking at yourself in the mirror every day, sometimes you miss it. But if you really sit down and you take measurements and you do all these different things, and you can actually track progress, right? So maybe it's more of a tracking progress on my journey, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah. And then why do
So
you think your interest in keeping that journal fades over time?
just doing other things, and I think to your point, I'm locked in on certain strict parameters. And so I don't use it as a creative space,
Yeah.
if I'm being honest. And
Yeah.
I need to leave it as being a creative space that maybe is telling truths and telling things that are going on, in my life, whatever I determine those are going to be, but, not be so strict and
Yeah.
stringent on what it
Yeah.
is that I'm doing.
Make
Yeah,
it a
you
fun
opened my
thing.
eyes up to that just this quick. So
Yeah,
thank you.
make it a fun thing. I mean, at
Yeah.
the risk of going into coaching mode, I think just make
You already have, if you didn't notice. No.
it's a natural thing, but make it fun for yourself. Don't make it a
Yeah.
chore. Make it a fun thing.
Yeah.
Approach it with a different. I mean, a great book is the Atomic Habits book. I don't know if you've read that. That's a great book. Make it as easy as possible. So, do it
Yeah.
at a set time every day where, if you're using a particular notebook, have the notebook somewhere that's easily accessible at the time of day that you've chosen to do your journaling. Is it first thing in the morning with a cup of coffee while you're looking
Yeah.
out? I don't know if you've got a nice view somewhere. Is it when you're going to bed? Yeah. So it's just setting that, setting it up. I'm not doing it any justice, but setting up the.
No, you are. You are.
Yeah. Okay. So setting it up so that it's not it's really easy to do, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. We talked about journaling enough, I guess.
Moving on.
But that was a good topic, and I really appreciate your insights on that. You've really opened my eyes up to a few things, and I know you probably said, "Oh, he just says that to anybody." No, really, you have, because as you were talking, Coach, I was visualizing things. I was like, okay, I get all of these notebooks, and what happens is I'll put it in a certain space, but then something comes up, and I have to write a note about something else, and now I contaminate it.
Yes.
I contaminated my journal.
Yes. It's the worst. Notebook contamination is awful.
So anyway, now I do need to get stricter and be better on that. So I need to put some kind of messaging on the top only for, whatever. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
You mentioned I can see that you're ex-military because you're using words like strict and rules and
It's 26 years
parameters
of it,
and yeah, it's ingrained.
Yeah, yeah. Because you want to make it. We call it Joe proof,
Yeah,
right? Like anybody, like because we mess things up in the military. Like we will beat some stuff up, so we want to make it as Joe proof as possible, so that we will succeed no matter what.
love it.
So, yeah, yeah.
That's a good philosophy.
All right. So you said tweakers.
Yes.
Tweaking your career. How can someone determine if they're truly ready for a career change versus just needing a new challenge like that podcasting for the young lady you spoke
Yeah.
about in their current role?
They need to read my book, obviously. I mean,
I
there's a
love it.
reason why there's a massive question mark on the front cover. So the book's called Ready to Quit Your Job, but it's a question. There's a big question mark at the end. And the whole idea of the book is that I'm taking people on a journey, hopefully, and that gets them to just think slightly differently and take the time to ask themselves questions that perhaps they've never asked or they haven't asked themselves for a long time. Like, what does success mean to you? It means something totally different. Every person I've ever spoken to has given me a different answer. And I say, so at the very beginning of my book, I say that I'm taking people through on this journey, and they're going to come out with one of four outcomes. So they're either going to be a Remainer, which is somebody that basically goes through everything and goes, do you know what? Actually, I really like the work that I'm doing. I love my colleagues. I like the company that I'm working for. My work actually feels meaningful. It's not a bullshit job. It's actually contributing in a way that feels good for me. But actually, I haven't been sleeping very well. So I'm turning up to work tired and grumpy and not the best version of myself. And that's then impacting my relationship with my colleagues. And, I'm not performing at my best, et cetera, et cetera. And so they just have a bit of a realization that things maybe outside of work need to change, or maybe sometimes it's just their mindset needs to change. So there's just a bit of a switch that's flipped and they go, actually. So for example, I had a teacher that came on my program recently, and he was so close to quitting his job. I mean, he was really almost ready to hand in his resignation. And then having gone through my program, he came out the other end and he was like, do you know what? I actually really love my job. I love the kids. I really love the subject that I'm teaching. This is where I'm meant to be. But he needed that time to self-reflect and come to that realization. And then sometimes realizing that you have a choice and you've really looked at all your options and you've made the decision to stay in a job is really empowering, because you're not the victim of being in this role anymore. You're actively choosing to stay, and that just shifts something in people, So that's the Remainer. And then the tweaker is somebody, like I mentioned earlier, that makes small tweaks to their job. And, it might be that they take on slightly different projects, or they might increase the number of hours that they're working or reduce them, or they might go into slightly, like a managerial role, or they might decide, actually, I don't want to manage anybody. I'll just, see if I can,
It's painful.
Yeah. So you just basically make little tweaks that make your job much better for you. And then the third option is a toe dipper. So a toe dipper is somebody who knows that ultimately they are going to make a big change. But before they make the change, they need to do a few things, like they might need to get a new qualification, for example. So they might enroll on an evening course or a weekend course. And get a certificate in something that they're interested in. It might be that they start volunteering in the area that they're interested in. It might be that they start a side hustle, a bit like what you're doing with the podcast, right? You're definitely a toe dipper. So really just exploring.
I need to put my toe up here. I can't.
There you go. So yeah, it's really about finding out what might be possible for you while you're still in employment, so you haven't got that financial pressure. And then last but not least is the leaper, who, as the name suggests, is somebody that has gone through everything, worked out their finances, had those conversations that are really important with their loved ones, and then has ultimately made the decision that they're ready to take the leap.
I love it. I love it. Toe dipper, leaper. What's the first one?
Remainer.
Remainer. I like that.
And leaper.
Remainer. I
That's
like
my little
Remainer.
framework that I work with.
I like Remainer, I think, because you mentioned the word mindset and how crucial that is, right? You give, well, an example with the teacher, you give them an opportunity to kind of, I don't know what you did, but they kind of weighed stuff. And in the end, they realized, I kind of like my job. I like the kids. They weighed it, and the benefits outweighed whatever their reluctance to stay there initially was.
Yeah.
Because probably mindset, they're looking at what matters most.
Totally.
Right.
Actually, one of the things that I cover in my course is something really simple, but really, I think, very powerful. It's the phrase, upgraded beliefs lead to upgraded outcomes. And I have that as one of my slides. And this guy that I was telling you about, the teacher, he loved that so much that he wrote it on a Post-it note, and he now has it in his office at school. And he's like, that's just my reminder that if I'm ever having a bad day, it really is just about the beliefs that I'm holding, and I can switch those on and off, or I can turn them to be positive. And it's funny how something really simple sometimes can make this huge difference. And I mean, it's changed his life.
Yeah, it really is. Just to get that light switch changed is it's kind of cool, because sometimes when you're going through things, it's hard, right? I mean, because we make things complicated, or things are just made complicated, whatever it is, right? But when you just figure out what matters most to me, when you get that mindset, what is it that I'm trying to get from this? What is it that I need from this?
Yeah.
You start looking at things differently than being a victim of a circumstance. You mentioned that earlier as well. Then things just look different. You're not bothered by every little thing, because you're focused on what you need out of it and what you're going to get out of it and what you can put into it, right? Instead of all these other external stuff. So I love it. I love talking about the mental shift.
Yeah, me too.
Awesome. You're checking all the boxes.
Tick,
So,
tick, tick.
So transferable skills. I mentioned to you earlier that I left the military. And I was blessed enough to get with an organization who had my best interests at heart. They were invested in my successfully transitioning from the military. Part of that is, if you do 20-something years at anything, right, you know all the jargon, you know all the ins and outs of these different things, you're comfortable in it, and you may not be able to speak, especially if you're going from one industry to another, especially. So from your perspective, how can someone identify and effectively communicate their transferable skills when transitioning into a new industry?
Yeah, I think that's a tricky one to do in isolation.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say that is because we're so used to, like you say, we're so used to using certain terminology, and we're so used to using certain skills and expertise on a daily basis that sometimes I work with clients who say, I don't really have any skills, and then when we start peeling back the layers, I'm like, oh my God, you're really good at this. And gosh, I can't believe you're able to do that. But because it's something that they do every day, they're just like, well, yeah, of course I do that. And sometimes it takes somebody else to point out, actually, do you realize that you're so much better at this than other people?
Mm-hmm.
And so and then they go, oh, I didn't realize that other people aren't able to do this as easily as I am. So I think it's really worth spending time. I mean, you can ask colleagues, you can ask your boss, you can ask your partner, you can ask people that have known you for a long time. Actually, they don't even have to have known you for that long, but just start asking other people what they see that you do that's really feels easy to you, but to them would be really either scary or hard. And obviously, if you work with a coach, then that's part of the coach's job, is to coax out all these things that you're really good at. And the other thing that I really have to emphasize is, just because you're really good at something doesn't mean that you should do that in your job. And what I mean by that is, I know so many people who are really good at certain things, but actually are really miserable doing that thing, even though they're good at it.
Mm-hmm.
So again,
Mm-hmm.
an example that I talk about in my book, I was working with a guy who's really good at doing presentations, like pitches to clients, really good at it. And they would win the client, pretty much every time. And he told me, do you know what? I do these pitches and I come away from them and I feel so drained. I do not enjoy doing them. It's like, wow, despite the fact that he's so brilliant at it. And so he delegates that to somebody else now. But it's interesting, isn't it? That I think we have this assumption that just because we're good at something, we should be using that in our careers. Mm-hmm. And it's not always the case. Going back to what I mentioned earlier, it's about really taking note of the activities that fill you up, that make you feel in the flow, that make you feel alive, that give you little butterflies, but like the best butterflies. Yeah. Does that answer your question? I feel like I've rambled.
Yes. No. You're not rambling, but my mind starts rambling when you start talking. I'm like, oh, I want to say this. I want to say that. Right.
Go for it. Go. So, what were you going to say?
Yeah. No. So really quick, the importance of storytelling.
Yeah.
So for me, practically, I have a team of people and they do great work. They really do great work. When it comes to performance evaluation time, they limit themselves.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? They don't really tell it. So I try to get them to buy into my vision of, look, we're going to do storytelling. It has multiple benefits. One, you can use these stories that we're going to draft up on your performance evaluation at the end of the year. You don't have to worry about it. Two, we get to highlight the things that our department does to the rest of the company, to the president and to others, right? So we can show the importance of it. Because people do so many things, to your point, and they don't even know that they're doing it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they're really good at problem solving. I don't know, that's a general term, but going that extra mile, all these buzzwords, right? But they do it and they look at it as just, oh, I'm just doing my job. Yeah, but you've gone above and beyond. I don't want to boost your bubble a little bit, right? But you care about what it is that you're doing. And storytelling, a lot of people are humble. They don't want to toot their own horn all the time, but they're always like, hey, I want to get paid more money. So toot your horn, right? And the whole thing, that doesn't have anything to do with this, except for the fact that you should be able to leverage and understand that everything you do has a benefit to somebody. You know what I mean? Or some company or some sort of problem can be solved. Housewives or moms or whatever the case may be, they do so many things that is beneficial in businesses all over the place.
Yeah.
So anyway, don't limit yourself. So I'd say two things. Don't limit yourself.
Yeah. It sounds like you're a really great boss for really taking the time to help your team members to work out how they've contributed in a really positive way. How cool is that?
Yeah, I try to, but like you said, a lot of times you don't see it. So I need to ask somebody, and I try to do this as much as possible. Hey, what can I do better? Mm-hmm. What can I do differently? Mm-hmm. What can I do that's more impactful? Is this too much? Am I being, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Just so I can get an assessment, because I know in my mind, I want us to be great. I want you to succeed. I want all of these things to happen, because that was the mentality in the military.
Yeah.
It wasn't about holding anybody back or keeping secrets, right? It was about everybody succeeds together.
Yeah.
And so that's my mentality. So anyway, enough about me.
But it's interesting because actually, let's talk about culture differences, because in the UK, it's definitely, people don't like to brag about themselves. It's I think people feel like it's frowned upon if you are a little bit braggy. And certainly from the UK, looking at America, it feels like people are much better at promoting, like sort of self-promotion, and at least, and maybe they're pretending to be, but they come across very confident and willing to tell the world how fabulous they are. So is that impression incorrect that we've got of Americans? And obviously that's a huge generalization also. I'm generalizing for 300 million odd people, but
I don't know if I can speak to it, but I believe honestly, it's what you see. So it's what you see, and there's a lot of people who are equally not as um forceful, or not forceful, but they're a little shy.
Yeah.
I'm a shy person, right? And it feels weird to toot your own horn. It
Mhm.
felt weird. And that was one of the things I had to go through when I was talking about transitioning, and I went through this one organization. It's about tooting your own horn,
Yeah.
because ultimately, yeah, you are in a team, but now you're a team of you
Yeah.
trying to get another job, trying to start a new career. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with promoting yourself. There is, kind of arrogance or dismissiveness to others. There's ways that we don't like to see people do it, and they do it, but there are strategic ways of doing it as well, from my
Yeah.
perspective,
Yeah.
where you can say, hey, I contributed to this.
Yeah.
This is what I have to offer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not like you can't do this without me.
It's a
So
fine line, isn't it?
exactly. It's different ways to present
Yeah.
yourselves. And some people do it very well.
Yeah.
But I believe most of us internally, it's just weird. It
Yeah.
feels funny.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
all right. So I love it. See what I'm saying? I get squirrely too. You talked a little bit about like taking different paths and turning around and talking to someone in line at, I say Starbucks. I'm not sure what they have in the UK. But what's the best way to network with professionals in a new field, especially when you don't have any existing connections?
Oh, that's a nice question. I do know I've never been asked that before, but I think it's one of those things that's really obvious to me. But I think you're right that
Mm-hmm.
it's not necessarily obvious to
Mm-hmm.
people who are wanting to make that transition. I mean, to me, it depends on obviously the industry that you want to go into. But I mean, so we have the world at our fingertips nowadays, right? If we
I'm gonna
were
see
having
what you
this,
say. I'm gonna
yeah,
see what you say.
if we had this conversation 50 years ago, it would be quite
Totally different.
different. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
today, I mean, I can look up and find, not pretty much everybody, but I can find and get access to a lot of people, millions, probably billions of
Mm-hmm.
people. And so social media is a really obvious place to start,
Mm-hmm.
right? Follow people that you're inspired by, follow people who maybe have a career that you're aspiring to emulate. Um, and then just start talking to people. Like start with the network that you have already, your friends, your family. Just start talking to them. And, let's say for argument's sake, you want to become a marine biologist at the age of 45. Why not? So
Mm-hmm.
then you just start telling everybody that this is something that I'm really interested in. How can I, do you know anybody in that field? Could you introduce me? And it's just, I think it's human nature also that people want to help each other. So I'm sure, like, I've not come across anybody yet that said this hasn't worked for them. But, just go
Mm-hmm.
out and start asking for help, ask for introductions, and they'll happen,
Yeah.
whether it's in real life or through social media.
Mm-hmm.
All the people are out there and most people want to help.
That's true. LinkedIn's a good spot too.
Yeah, definitely.
Understand what it is that you need too.
Yeah,
Understand what it is that you need, and understand what it is that you can provide.
yeah.
Have that two way. Don't go in there and just be someone who just takes, take, 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 take,
That's
take,
true.
take. You know what I'm saying?
I think that's really
You
good
got
advice because there's a
yeah,
lot of
yeah,
that as
yeah,
well.
yeah. I love it. All right, toe dippers.
Hmm.
What are some low risk ways to explore a new career path before fully committing to it?
Yeah. I mean, starting little passion projects like your
Mm-hmm.
podcast, for example. I
Mm-hmm.
had a lady on my podcast recently who's a project manager. Actually, she's from the US. She is a project manager by day, and by night she's a stand-up comedian, a very good one at
I
that.
love it. I love
Yes,
it. Uh huh.
and why not? She decided that she's funny by nature. She's always been funny. She's always made people laugh. And then one day she was like, well, do you know, I'm just going to give it a go. I'm just going to stand on a stage. I mean, terrifying for most people. But
Yes.
she was like, I'm just going to give it a go. And because she's an American citizen and she's living in the UK and she's on a restricted visa, she can't earn money from her gigs yet. But at some point, when her visa requirements change, she'll be able to earn money from that. And, she'll have all this catalogue of experience of doing stand-up comedy that she can use. So she's like my perfect example of somebody that's toe dipping. But it can be
That is a
volunteering.
really good example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another lady that came on my course, she's been with the same company for 25 years, but she's really interested in coral reef conservation, and like very different to her day job. But she now volunteers and she dives and does, I don't even know what it is, I have to admit, but she dives and helps to preserve coral reef.
Yeah.
It's so cool. And at some point, there might be an opportunity for her to do that as a paid gig.
Right.
But for now, she's doing it and she's volunteering. And again, she's back to your point about networking. She's meeting all these people that are already in that world. So as and when a job becomes available, she's going to be perfectly positioned.
Isn't that something? I was trying to while I was listening to you talk about these great examples, think of the saying, but the bottom line is preparation.
Yes.
You don't start preparing when the opportunity is there.
Yeah.
You got to be prepared and you got to be ready.
Yeah.
When that door opens. And those were two just great examples. Toe dipping.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. It isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, you can wait and then you can flail about and figure it out when you get in that role, right? But if you just toe dip just a little bit and figure out some things, anyway, enough of that.
And
mindset.
I mean,
go.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, on the other hand, you might do some volunteering or do a side gig or whatever and realize that it's not everything that you expected it to be. And then that gives you a newfound appreciation for the work that you are doing. So, either way, it's a win-win situation.
I love it. Good. That's all about mindset, right? You want to get out there, do it, feel it, touch it, experience it.
Exactly.
And then you can make a good decision instead of looking at someone else who does it amazingly, because they are perfectly suited for this thing that they're doing. And you're like, oh, I want to do that.
Yeah.
But you may not be perfectly suited to do that thing. It may not be that thing that gives you that, I love doing this, right? Yeah. So I love it.
And actually, podcasting is the perfect example of that. I don't know what the statistic is off the top of my head, but there's some crazy statistic around the number of podcasts that are started. And people do like 4 episodes and they go, nah, it's not for me.
Yeah. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
It's definitely,
a lot of time.
You have to be passionate about it.
Yeah. I just love meeting new people and talking and learning something new every day. So for me, it makes sense. But I also love the whole overarching, desire to inspire people.
Yeah.
Right. Now, this episode here is really giving a lot of strategies and tips and, considering your mindset and, letting go of some parameters and, things like that. Right. So it's more of an inspirational one. But some are people who have actually been through some bad stuff. I had someone who was on drugs and, someone had been locked up and, they're telling their story, but now they're in a whole different place now. Yeah. Right. So we stumble. So it's inspirational. So anyway, I don't know why I brought all of that up.
Well, you were not justifying, but explaining why you're still, you're one of the few who are still carrying on with your podcasts.
Yeah, I love it.
Me too.
All right.
For the same reason.
I know. It's fun. It's fun though. It's fun and you feel that I loved it. Like I'm gonna get off of this and I'm like, I love this conversation.
Yeah, me too.
I love what we talked about, right? Because that's how I'm feeling right now. All right. So mindset. What mindset shifts are essential for someone navigating the uncertainty and challenges of a career transition? Now, I wish I would have been able to ask you this question as I was leaving the military.
Yeah.
But go ahead. Let me see what you say now for all of those who are about to do it.
I think the first thing that comes up for people when they think of a career change is fear. We're
Yeah.
fearful
Yeah.
because our brains are designed to like the stuff that's familiar to us. And so as soon as we introduce something that's unfamiliar, our brains go, whoa, and the alarm bells start going. And that's our brain's designed to do that, right? That's what keeps us safe. And that's why the human race still exists, because we have this brain that warns us, hey, this might be unsafe. So the first thing that I always get my clients to do is really look at what the fears are and then challenge them in a nice way. It goes back to the upgraded beliefs. So really, what are the fears? And sometimes we have fears that other people have instilled in us. And sometimes they're instilled in us at a really, really young age. And it's very subconscious to us, as adults. But when we stop and we go, oh, hang on, why do I feel that way about that? Like, why am I fearful of not earning money when actually all the evidence in my life for the last 40, 50 years suggests that I'm really good at making money? And I've done it really successfully. And I've got a bank balance that proves that. That's just an example. But it's really just picking those fears apart a little bit and just challenging them and going, well, is that something that's stopping me from making a change? And then replacing, if we have beliefs that are really stopping us, we're starting to it's so powerful just becoming aware of the beliefs. One of the things I do is I get people to think about what beliefs have got them to where they are today. And then we look at what beliefs are holding you back from going forward and what beliefs would be really powerful if you had them about yourself and the world at large. And can you start believing those instead? And I'm not saying to people be completely deluded and just believe whatever you like. But then we go, okay, well, what can we back this up with? Let's back this up with something. And it's that unconscious bias thing, isn't it? Then we start looking for evidence that actually the reality that we have been holding isn't serving us and actually isn't real. And we can replace it with something that's much more empowering. So it's really quite fascinating to see how powerful that shift can be in people. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. You've always been answering my questions. I don't know why you keep asking me. Did that absolutely answer my question?
Because I get very passionate and I go off on a tangent sometimes, and then I go, "What was the question again?"
I think we're like-minded because I do the same thing, and you find all these little branches that kind of attach loosely to it sometimes.
Yeah.
And if we go too far off on a limb, we may fall off the whole topic. And that's my little analogy.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll keep it going because I'm going to be conscious of your time, but I'm loving this conversation. So, what's the single most, and think about this one, what's the single most important first step someone should take when they're serious about changing careers?
Do you know what? I think the first thing you should do is chat to your partner about it. Honestly, from all the conversations I've had, the thing that really stands out is making a successful career transition is very much dependent on how supportive your partner is, your life partner, if you have one. And if you don't have one, then it might be your parents or other people that have big influence over you. But assuming that you're in a relationship with somebody, the first thing I would do is have that conversation with them, because they will make or break your career transition. And I know that sounds really quite dramatic.
Wow.
But 9 out of 10 times that will be the case.
Wow. All right. The odds are stacked. So let's make sure we have that conversation before we go ahead and quit and jump into something else, right? Yeah. Let's have that conversation. I love it.
Do you know, I have a whole section in my book called, so I call people who are close to us, who don't believe in, or who aren't on board with our dreams. I call them our chief dream squishers, CDS for short.
I
And
love it.
and these people, they have a really powerful effect, right? Because we don't want to let people down. We want people to be proud of us. We want people to be on our side. We want them to support us. And if you go to your partner or your parent or somebody else who's dear to you and you tell them your plan and they go, whoa, do not do that. Under any circumstance, don't make that change. Then that's going to have a really big impact on us. And for a huge majority of us, we'll go, oh, okay, oh, and it'll put self-doubt in our minds, again, for potentially good reason. As for some people who are quite bolshy will go, well, I hear you say no, and so I'm going to do it, and I'm going to prove you wrong. So we have
No
both.
matter what.
Yeah, exactly. But I have a whole chapter dedicated to having that conversation with your chief dream squisher, because they're only seemingly squishing your dreams because of their beliefs and their fears and their experiences. And it's probably not malicious. It's very rare that somebody who's dear to you has malintent towards your dreams and to you. So it's really about having a conversation with them. It's I spent a lot of time on that chapter, and I spoke to a lot of people about that, because it is a big thing that stops people from making change. If their partner says, I don't think you should do that, they end up oftentimes listening to their partner, not making a change and staying in a miserable job. And so I've really dedicated a lot of time to researching how to have that conversation, and also to say that if your partner's first reaction is hell no, it means hell no in that moment, because you've just sprung this on them and they're not really sure how to react, and immediately all these fears enter their heads, and you have to give them time to get their heads around it, and you have to almost put a business case together to explain to them what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, why you think it's going to be successful. And hopefully at some point they'll come around to the idea and be supportive. But we can't expect people to just be like, yeah, do whatever. I don't, whatever crazy idea you've got. So yeah, it's a really tricky subject, let's say. And that's why I've dedicated so much time to it.
I'm really excited about figuring out, anyway, your book. We talked about this earlier. I need to get more technically savvy so that I can get this book, because all of these things, like, I'm like, hey, what was that quote you said that the guy took and put it on his wall in his classroom, and what is it? Because there's so many different things, and I appreciate you sharing the tidbits, because it is really drawing me in to want to invest my time right into reading your book. So hopefully you're conveying that as well to the listeners, because it sounds like an amazing book.
Yeah, I hope so. It's interesting. When I wrote the book, it's so hard. It's the first book I've ever written, and I wrote it, obviously, as you do, in isolation, just me and my laptop in my office. And you're writing all these thoughts down and trying to make sense of them and put them into some kind of order so that other people can follow and hopefully make sense of it as well. And really honestly, I didn't know whether what I'd written was absolute garbage or something that was genuinely going to be useful to people. And I remember the day the book went live on Amazon, I was a nervous wreck. I mean, I haven't felt anxiety like that. And I mean, literally by like maybe 3 days after it went live, I started getting messages from people. The first 2 messages I got were from people I know, but they wrote and they were like, "I've just finished your book. I've read it in one sitting," and I was like, "Wow, okay." I mean, I've just done the audiobook. It took me 4 hours to read it, right? Just over 4 hours. So I'm like, "Oh, okay. So you must be a bit of a bookworm." This was both people. I had almost exactly the same conversation. I said, "Oh, you must be a bit of a bookworm," and they both came back to me. They don't know each other. They both came back to me and said, this is the first book I've read since school. and they're like, they're middle-aged people. So I was like, wow, that's amazing. And so that was like literally within 3 or 4 days, I'd had these 2 messages. And then since then, thankfully, I get it. I mean, now I'm tooting my own horn and it feels really uncomfortable. But just to say, without sounding like an arrogant so-and-so, I get messages almost daily now saying how useful they found the book, how easy they found it to read, and how, I mean, some people have said it's completely changed their lives, which I never in a million years thought I would get that sort of feedback. So it's for anybody who's thinking about writing a book and they're not quite sure, just do it. You just never know who you might impact with it.
I love it. Wow. Okay, I'm really sold now. All right, so I'm a veteran. We got to push through because I'll start asking you all kind of questions, and I'm gonna give you an opportunity to talk about whatever I didn't ask you. But anyway, for someone transitioning out of the military into civilian work, and this is from a veteran, what advice do you have for finding a meaningful career?
Actually, I have worked with a few people who are ex-military, and it's a really interesting one because I think people who come from military come with, you can almost tell people who have a military background in that they tend to be very disciplined. They like to have a schedule, and I think it's obviously quite a regimented environment, and what's expected of you pretty much at all time. And I mean, in some roles it's different, but there's you're sort of there's your uniform. You don't even have to think about what you're going to wear. So I find that really quite fascinating to work with. And I can see why transitioning from the military is probably more daunting than transitioning from any other sector, because it's not a career, it's a lifestyle, really, isn't it? Well, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think
you're right.
Yeah, it becomes so much part of your identity that it's a really it's an interesting transition. But it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that it's trying to spend as much time with civilians as possible to see that there is life outside of military. My husband comes from a military family. His dad's military and his brother's military. So I have quite a lot of experience of talking to people about, the transition. But it is just getting back into talking to non-military people and seeing what is life like outside of that, and what does a career mean outside of the military, and what can it look like, and exploring what interests you, which you might not have had time for when you're so engulfed in your work. So it's just exploring what you enjoy.
Visualization. Yeah. I like it. I just couldn't see. It was like a wall that was there. And then what I did see, I give you something funny real quick. My first duty station when I was in the Army was in Alaska. And I was like, God damn, Alaska? So this was back in 1991, 91, 92. And I went there and I had this conception or this idea of what Alaska was based off of very limited information because I never really explored it, right? And it was like just like where I was in Maryland, but just colder. I mean, it had city houses. I'm thinking igloos and horses, no buses, no, things like that, right? Nothing normal. And I won't speak for anybody else. When I was in the military and it became time to get out, I feared it because I didn't know what it looked like. Now, I'm not saying I didn't live outside of the military. Like I went to Walmart and stuff. So I understood, that's not the only thing. But one of the things that that we are indoctrinated with is you're a soldier 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
And you represent the military.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
Right. So that's
there's
kind
no
of
off
your
button.
Exactly. Exactly. So when it's over with, like for me, I was, I guess, fearful because I was more comfortable. So I didn't take the time to visualize what it looked like. To your point, I continued to work. I went on missions all the way up to the end because that's what I was comfortable with. And I was lucky because I found that organization that I was telling you about. I was really lucky because they changed everything. It was like talking about reading your book. Like it took the blinders off my face, off my eyes. And it really gave me direction, purpose, all the things the military told you, but for me and not for the mission.
Yeah.
Like I'm the mission now. So I think having that visualization, taking a look at what you should expect or could expect, what is it that you like? I think that's great advice.
Yeah.
And just be prepared to let go. Like that's not all you are.
Yeah. Totally.
As a soldier, right?
And I think that's a really important point, that for a lot of people, their work becomes so much part of their identity for obvious reasons. We spend a hell of a lot of time. I think it's 90,000 hours of our life at work, on average, and probably more for military. So of course it's going to become part of your identity. And again, if you're in a job where you're maybe managing, big teams, and you've got a big title and a big salary and, a huge responsibility, then, it affects your ego. It affects, and you are somebody, right? And if I'm not in that role anymore, then who am I without that job title? So I think that's a huge thing that people have to overcome. But just going back to something that you just said, I mean, we could talk all day, right? But
I know. I'm looking at the clock like, all right.
We need
I hope
to
you don't have nothing
wrap
else
it
going
up.
on right now. No, go ahead. What you got?
I'm just neglecting my children. It's fine. They can
Don't do that.
No, what you mentioned a word just now, which is a really important word. You mentioned the word luck. You said, I was really lucky that I came across this organization. And honestly, I think I must do this. I must do an audit one day. But every single guest that I've interviewed for my podcast about their career change, not every single, but I would say probably 90% of them at some point in the interview say, I was really lucky because blah, blah, blah. And I don't know if you're familiar with the book, The Luck Factor by, his name escapes me right now. It's a great book. It's called The Luck Factor. If you do a search, you'll find it. I read it many years ago, and it really stuck with me. And I actually mention it in my book as well, that, about how we create our own luck, and how sometimes luck is a matter of perception, and how we can increase our luck. But I just find it very, very interesting that a lot of people who've made successful career transitions will use the word luck at some point to describe their journey.
Yeah. It is interesting. And I think, I say luck because it worked out. And, I'm not going to ask you this question, but I used to ask a lot of people, do you have any regrets? Right. So if I ask you, hey, do you have any regrets about anything in your life? 9 times out of 10, you're going to say, no, I don't have any regrets because blah, blah, blah. Because regrets is not a hindsight type question. It is a foresight. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So in the time, and things just happen. And so for me, I say luck, but it's really looking at an opportunity and making a decision in that moment.
Yeah.
And you've been taught and primed in experience and socialization and all these things. So you are so I say luck, but I was very prepared to make that decision to invest my time with this organization.
Yeah.
It just so happens that the organization was a very good organization, and I really benefited from the services that they provided.
Yeah.
But you say luck, like you said, when you really look at it, I mean, you're prepared to make that decision.
Yeah.
You're prepared to say the right thing to this random person that has this amazing opportunity. That, you know what I'm saying? You're prepared. And it goes
Totally.
back to what we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
You know, the lady who's out coral reefing
Yeah.
and the stand-up comedian right there prepared. So when Kevin Hart says, "Hey, I got a set open for you. You want to come?" Like, she's got all these hours.
Good to go.
And it's an easy decision.
Totally.
You know.
Totally.
And
then you've created
So
your
anyway,
own luck.
You've created your own luck.
Mm-hmm.
You've created your own luck. I love it. Okay. Is there something that you like to talk about that we haven't covered just yet? Because we want you to get back to your kids.
I mean, like I said earlier, we could probably talk all day. I think we've probably covered the main things.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything else really. The only thing I would, if I'm allowed to do a little, not a plug, but if anybody is thinking about making a career transition, obviously, my book is available, but I also I like to help as much as possible. So I created some free resources that are on my website at yescareercoaching.com. So if anybody is like, I don't want to spend money, but I really need some direction, then they can go there and hopefully they'll find something that's useful. Obviously they can listen to the podcast if they want to be inspired by people who've made career changes. And I've tried to create playlists on YouTube to make it easy to find the conversations that are most relevant to you. So, some are based around how to make a hobby into a career. Some are, because I talk to a lot of teachers, I've got a whole playlist dedicated to ex-teachers who've now transitioned into something else. Career change after the age of 40, after the age of 50, after the age of 30, etc. So I've got different playlists that hopefully, people can go and go, oh yeah, that's me. I don't have to trail through, this at the moment 50 odd interviews. So you don't have to go through all of them to find the one that's relevant to you.
That's awesome. Are you on LinkedIn?
Yes.
Instagram?
I use Instagram as well. LinkedIn is probably the one that I'm not probably. LinkedIn is definitely the one that I'm most active on.
All right. So what's your LinkedIn? Just put your name in?
Yeah.
Is it anything special?
Yesim, so Yesim and Nicholson, Nichholson. And I think I'm the only Yesim Nicholson in the world, so I shouldn't be too difficult to find. Whereas Lee Jones, how many Lee Joneses are there in the world?
It's a lot of us. It's a lot of us. I know. Never mind. I was in the military. No, I was in the military, and they sent me the file. Like, back in the day, they had these files of all of our stuff. Our military career. So it's like our little Bible, our little whatever you want to call it. It's like everything about us.
Yeah.
They sent me I'm Lee A. Jones. They sent me Lee E. Jones's military packet for everything. And I'm like, we got social security numbers. Like, how am I getting this guy? You just looking at names?
Did somebody get hacked as a result of that?
I don't know. I took it to my HR person and they let them deal with it.
Right.
But the sad part is they lost mine, so I have no idea, and I had to recreate all of that stuff. That's a whole nother conversation. But
maybe there's something fortuitous in that. Sometimes things happen for a reason.
Yeah. That was another thing I like to say, because I feel so comfortable talking to you. But that was another thing, and I'll say something to you, to the veterans out there, if you're getting ready to transition out, or the people getting ready to transition out, they're not veterans yet. If you are transitioning and you walk down a hall to a station, to a door, and they say, "Hey, do you want us to create your your medical file for you digitally?" Say yes. Say yes. Because what happens is, and this is, you can tell your other clients when you have some veterans that may be from the United States, what happens is you have to get all your documentations, and depending on how long you've been in the military. Now, you know, if you're a little younger, it's all digitized. But for us older, you know, individuals, you have to go, you have to find your medical records, blah, 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 put it all together, make it easy for the VA to look at it and give you a rating, a disability rating. All right. This has nothing to do with this conversation, but this is a PSA for the veterans out there. If they do this, it's like creating a book on your medical history. And it has a title page, table of contents, all your medical stuff. So easy that I got a rating like that so fast. Ratings equate to money. I don't know if it's like that in the UK, but you do get a disability rating, which can equate to money, and it also gives you other things that are available to you as a veteran who has a disability. So that's my PSA. But Yesim, yeah, I know. Yesim, because when I got that, I was like, oh my Lord, I was not expecting this to be this amazing. So anyway, this has been an insightful conversation on what it truly takes to make bold career changes. And I think mindset, preparation, these are some key things that we talked about. We talked about overcoming fear and finding what makes us thrive. And you've given us so much to think about. And I just want to thank you for sharing your expertise and inspiring the listeners and myself to take control of our careers. And for those of you who are tuning in, make sure that you subscribe to Hindsight the Podcast so that you don't miss more conversations like this one. And until next time, keep pushing forward and be more. And get that book. What's the name of the book again?
Ready to Quit Your Job.
Now, only if you're ready to quit your job.
Yeah,
only
available on Amazon worldwide.
If you're happy with your job, stay there, right? But you may still want to get this book just in case. All right. Thank you so much, Yesim.
It's been my pleasure.
Hey, thanks for joining me here on Hindsight the Podcast. I'm your host, Lee Jones. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know I did. And while I have you here, why don't you take your mouse, go over and click on that subscribe button. No, not right there. Over to the right. No, down, right there. Boom. Thank you. Now, thank you for subscribing to Hindsight the Podcast. I'm your host, Lee Jones.